The last thing Margaret Breen wrote in her diary before everything went to hell was this: "Provisions scarce, hides our only recourse, God help us." She wrote it on February 5, 1847. By February 25th, the hides were gone. By March, the only thing left to eat in those frozen cabins was the people who had already died. And some of them weren't even waiting for people to die. Tonight, Pale Meridian is taking you to Donner Pass, not the clean little story they teach in school, not the sanitized tale of human resilience and hope. This is the version the survivors spent the rest of their lives trying to bury, the version the snow kept hidden for 170 years. The sounds, the smells, the specific things that happened in the dark inside those cabins that none of them ever fully described out loud, because the words themselves would have broken anyone who heard them. This is not history. This is what the Sierra Nevada swallowed in the winter of 1846 and has never fully given back. This is Pale Meridian, where the frontier ends and the darkness begins. You need to understand something before we walk into those mountains. These were not stupid people. These were not reckless people. These were families, farmers, merchants, craftsmen from Illinois, Missouri, Tennessee. They had sold everything they owned, loaded their children into wagons and pointed west because California was supposed to be worth it. 87 people, 23 men, 15 women, 47 children. The youngest was still an infant. They left Independence, Missouri in the spring of 1846 under the leadership of George Donner, a 62-year-old man who had every reason to believe he knew what he was doing. He didn't. None of them did. The first mistake was a man named Lansford Hastings. He wrote a book promising a shortcut that would save hundreds of miles. He had never actually taken it. He had simply looked at a map and decided it would probably work. The Donner Party believed him. That shortcut added a month to their journey. A month they did not have. A month that meant they reached the base of the Sierra Nevada on October 31st, 1846, to find 8 feet of snow already waiting for them. 8 feet, and more coming. They tried to cross anyway. They made it 11 miles. Then the snow came again. Not a storm. Something worse. A relentless, suffocating white that simply kept falling until the world disappeared. The cattle died first, wandering into the drifts and not coming back. The wagons became useless. They stopped at Truckee Lake on November 4th, 1846, and they did not leave until the following April, the ones who were still alive. There were 3 camps. The main camp at Truckee Lake, crammed into 2 crude cabins and a lean-to built against a large granite boulder, and 5 miles back at Alder Creek, the Donner family camp. Canvas tents stretched over pine branches in a Sierra Nevada winter, with temperatures dropping to 20 below. George Donner had cut his hand fixing a wagon axle, a small wound. In a normal year, it would have healed in a week. In that camp, it rotted, slowly, then faster. The infection climbed past his wrist, past his forearm. He spent 5 months watching his own arm turn black and fall apart while he was still breathing. His wife Tamzine sat beside him every day. She was offered rescue 3 separate times. 3 times she looked at her husband, and she stayed. She was 44 years old. She would not see California. The cabins at Truckee Lake were not built for this. The walls let the cold in, the roofs let the snow in. They burned everything, wagons, furniture, the last green pine, until the cabins filled with choking smoke that settled at breathing height and stayed there. The food ran out by mid-December. After that, they boiled the ox hides, gray, gelatinous, tasteless slime they called soup. It gave them almost nothing. They ate it anyway, 3 times a day, while the children got quieter, and then simply stopped moving. You need to understand what starvation does to children. It does not look like the movies. The crying stops first. They learn faster than adults that asking produces nothing. Then the movement stops. They lie still, eyes too large for faces that have lost all their softness, watching, with a stillness that looks like patience, but is not patience. is something the body does when it has to choose what to keep and what to let go. The parents watched this happen every day, every night, in a dark, smoky cabin under 20 feet of snow, with nothing to offer but gray hide soup that was not enough and had never been enough and was running out. The first death at the lake camp was Charles Stanton. He deserves more than history has given him. He was not even supposed to be there. He had no family in those wagons. When the party became stranded in November, he volunteered to ride ahead, through the pass, alone. He made it to Sutter's Fort in California. He came back, with food, with mules, with 2 Native American guides named Luis and Salvador. He came back to those cabins knowing exactly what he was coming back to, and he came anyway. He went snowblind in December, the glare off the snow and the starvation taking his vision one day at a time. During one of the early escape attempts, he fell behind. The group stopped to wait. He caught up. He sat down in the snow. He lit his pipe. He looked at the people around him with eyes that could not fully see them anymore. He told them to go on without him. They did. They found him in the spring, still sitting, pipe still in his hand, perfectly preserved by the cold. He looked like he was waiting for something. He had been waiting. He had just stopped expecting it to come. By mid-December, they understood the truth, not as a fear, as a fact. No one was coming. If they wanted to live, they would have to walk out. 17 people volunteered. They called themselves the Forlorn Hope. They made snowshoes from ox bows and rawhide. They took 6 days of rations. They walked into the mountains on December 16th. It would take 32 days, 6 days of food, 32 days of walking. Do that math. Then understand that the math is the least disturbing part. By Christmas, the food was gone. The temperature at night dropping to 20 below, sometimes colder. The 2 brothers in the group, William and Lemuel Murphy, 11 and 10 years old, were still trying to keep up. By New Year's, they couldn't anymore. Then the bodies started appearing in the snow. Charles Berger, Antonio, Franklin Graves, who had built the snowshoes they were all wearing, who died watched by his daughters Sarah and Mary, who had to leave his body in the snow and keep walking. Patrick Dolan died after a night where something in his mind simply broke. He started raving, tearing his clothes off in the snow, the specific horror of a body whose temperature regulation has failed so completely that the freezing man reports himself as burning. The others held him down. He fought them. Then he stopped fighting. Then he died. 4 bodies in 10 days, 30 miles from nowhere, no food, and the specific terrible arithmetic of survival sitting in front of all of them. What happened next was not a decision anyone made out loud. It was not a vote. It was not a meeting. It was something slower, something darker. Starvation does not make you an animal. That is the comfortable lie. The disturbing truth is that it makes you more yourself, more stripped of the specific costly luxuries that civilization requires, the luxury of not calculating certain possibilities, the luxury of the moral certainty that comes from never having been hungry enough to question it. Starvation removes those luxuries one at a time, and what is left underneath is a person who knows exactly what they are thinking, and is watching themselves think it and cannot stop. The bodies were in the snow. They were food, not metaphorically, calories. The specific thing required for the people still breathing to continue breathing, and everyone in the Forlorn Hope already knew it, had known it for days. They sat with the bodies for one more full day. Then someone made the first cut. The accounts do not agree on who. They never will. The flesh was frozen solid. It had to be thawed over the fire. The fat hissed. The smell was sweet. Human fat smells sweet when it burns. This is not a metaphor. It is a biological fact. The specific chemical composition of human subcutaneous fat, when rendered over heat, produces a smell the human nose registers as sweet. Multiple survivors described this smell independently, in accounts given years apart. People who had no reason to coordinate their descriptions, every single one of them used the same word, sweet. Some refused. William Eddy, Mary Graves, Luis and Salvador. They refused for 3 days. Then the biology of extreme starvation removed the option. The will was still there. The body stopped obeying it. And they ate. They were careful about one thing. They never ate their own family. The bodies were divided among the non-relatives, a deliberate conscious rule maintained across days of desperate hunger by people who had just done something civilization spent thousands of years constructing moral frameworks to prevent. The fact that they maintained that rule is more disturbing than if they hadn't, because it means they knew, every moment, exactly what they were doing. What do you think it felt like to sit across that fire from someone eating a body you recognized and eat from a body that someone across that fire recognized? The accounts do not describe this. They describe around it, in the careful way of people who found that language was insufficient and decided insufficient language was worse than silence. Luis and Salvador left, walked away from the group in the night into the snow toward what they thought would be safety. William Eddy found them later, collapsed in the snow, alive, barely. He tried to help them. Then, the rest of the group caught up. The group was out of food again. Luis and Salvador were alive, barely, but alive. William Foster shot them, both of them. The group ate. Two men who had volunteered to guide strangers through a mountain range in winter, who had made it to California and come back, who had spent months doing everything asked of them, died in the snow at the hands of the people they had come to help, because the people they had come to help needed to eat. History has not been kind to William Foster. History has also not been particularly interested in Luis and Salvador. Their names appear in the accounts and then disappear. The Forlorn Hope reached Johnson's Ranch on January 17, 1847, 32 days after they left. Of the 17 who started, 7 survived, 2 men, 5 women. The women outlasted the men at a rate that surprised everyone. The Forlorn Hope survivors did not know the biology of it. They just knew the women were still walking when the men fell. The 7 survivors who reached Johnson's Ranch were not recognizable as the people who had left Truckee Lake in December. Their skin gray-yellow, their eyes sunken. Their movements the slow, careful movements of bodies that have learned that every calorie spent moving has to come from somewhere. They ate, they were cared for. And then they told people what was still happening in those cabins. While the Forlorn Hope was dying in the snow, the people left behind were dying more slowly. Hunger at rest is a different kind of monster. It is patient. It takes its time. 12-year-old Virginia Reed kept a journal, neat handwriting, every day. January 13th. Mr. Graves died this morning. No grief, no elaboration, just the date, the name, the thing that happened. January 27th. Mrs. Murphy says she will commence on Milt and eat him. Milt Elliott had been a teamster for the Reed family. He had been Virginia's friend. He died February 9th. And a 50-year-old woman with 7 children, sitting in a dark cabin under 20 feet of snow with no food, looked at his body and made a decision. Virginia Reed wrote it down in her neat 12-year-old handwriting, without commentary, as if it were weather. The historical record strongly suggests Mrs. Murphy followed through. The cabins by February were something beyond description. The people inside had not seen sunlight in 3 months, had not breathed air that did not smell like unwashed bodies and boiled hide, and the specific sweet rot of human remains stacked in the snow outside because there was no way to bury them, and moving them required energy that nobody had. Louis Keseberg lay in his bunk, injured leg, could not walk, could not leave. He lay in his corner for months, watching the world of those cabins from a fixed horizontal position, watching people stop moving, watching children get quieter, watching the specific progression of starvation in a dozen people simultaneously, with nowhere to look, and no ability to look away. He became specific about certain things, in ways the other survivors found disturbing, in ways the rescuers would find worse than disturbing. The first rescue party reached the lake camp on February 18th. 7 men who had pushed through the pass on foot, carrying food on their backs. What they found, the accounts share a specific quality: careful language. The language of people trained to observe and report, encountering something that resists both. The survivors were barely recognizable, not as exaggeration, as clinical observation: eyes too large in faces with no flesh left on them, the cheekbones, the orbital ridges, structures that fat normally softens, exposed, visible in ways they are not supposed to be visible. The children, worst of all. Several rescuers could not determine the ages of the children they found. A 7-year-old who has been starving for 3 months does not look 7, does not look like a child, but looks like something that used to be a child and is now something else. Still breathing, still present, fundamentally changed. They brought food. They had been warned not to let the survivors eat too much too fast, that starving people who eat too quickly can die from the eating. The gut shuts down after weeks of nothing. The survivors were given small amounts, carefully, over time. The specific cruelty of that, even though it was the right decision to have made it this far, to be sitting in front of the people who came to save you and be told you cannot eat yet. The third rescue party reached the lake camp in early March. Most survivors had already been evacuated. What remained was Louis Keseberg. His legs still would not allow him to walk. He had been left behind with the bodies for 3 weeks in the cabin, alone. When the third rescue party arrived, they found him alive. They also found a pot near his bunk. Inside the pot was human liver, human lungs, and a large quantity of human blood. They asked about Tamzine Donner, George Donner's wife, the woman who had refused to leave her dying husband, who had watched him die, who had then made the 5-mile journey from Alder Creek to the lake camp on a body that had been starving for months through snow still 10 feet deep. She had made that walk. She had arrived, and she was not there. Keseberg's answer has been argued over for 170 years. He said she came to the lake cabin after her husband died. He said she died in the night. He said he did what was necessary. Tamzine Donner was 44 years old. She had 3 daughters who survived the winter. Those daughters spent the rest of their lives not speaking about what happened to their mother, not because they didn't think about it, because they thought about it constantly, and had decided that speaking produced nothing useful. Louis Keseberg made it to California. He opened a restaurant in Sacramento. It failed, not through any specific incident, through the quiet economic pressure of a community that knew what had been in that pot, what he had said about Tamzine Donner, and chose not to eat at his restaurant. He tried other businesses. They failed. He spent decades moving between failed enterprises and a reputation he could not escape. He gave interviews. He denied the worst accusations. He explained the necessity of what he did not deny. He expressed no guilt that anyone could identify as genuine. He lived until 1895. His last interview was when he was in his 70s. They asked if he had any regrets. He looked at the interviewer for a long time. Then he said, "I did what I had to do to live. I would do it again. I am not ashamed of living." He did not say he was not ashamed of anything else. That sentence, that specific absence. He was not ashamed of living. He did not say he was not ashamed of anything else. Whatever he carried from those 3 weeks alone in that cabin, he carried it to the end. 47 people survived the Donner Party. But survival is not the same as living. Virginia Reed lived to be 87 years old. She never talked about certain things, the specific things she had seen, the specific things she had eaten, the specific things she had watched happen to people she had known her entire life. She wrote one letter in the spring of 1847. After she reached California, she wrote about relief, about gratitude, about faith, and at the end, one sentence to her cousin back in Illinois. Do not let this letter dishearten anybody. Remember, never take no cutoffs and hurry along as fast as you can. 12 years old. Everything she had seen, everything she had eaten, everything she had watched, reduced to one sentence of practical advice. Never take no cutoffs. Hurry along as fast as you can. What do you think she was not writing in that letter? What do you think a 12-year-old girl processes about the winter of 1846 and chooses not to put in a letter to her cousin? What did she tell herself about it in the years and decades that followed? What did she not tell her children? The site of the main camp at Truckee Lake is now a California state park. The cabins are gone, but the granite boulder the Murphy cabin was built against is still there, 19 feet tall. In the winter of 1846, the snow reached the top of that boulder, 20 feet of snow, and inside the cabin packed against its base, the Murphys, the Reeds, the Breens, boiling hides, burning wagon parts, getting quieter and quieter and smaller. Interstate 80 runs right through the pass now. Thousands of cars every day. Families in SUVs, truck drivers, skiers heading to Tahoe, people who have never heard the name Donner, passing within a few hundred feet of that boulder, without knowing, without feeling anything. But in a bad snow year, the pass closes, and the silence that falls on Donner Pass when the highway is closed and the snow is coming down is the same silence that fell on those cabins in November 1846. The same cold, the same white, the same merciless indifference. The boulder is still there. The snow falls on it every winter, and the things that happened at its base in 1846 are still there, in the ground, in the cold, in the specific quality of the air at that elevation on a winter night when the pass is closed and the highway is silent and there is nothing between you and the dark except 20 feet of snow and what's underneath it. This is Pale Meridian, digging up nightmares from the past so you don't have to. Subscribe. Leave a comment telling me which detail from tonight is going to keep you awake, and if you've ever driven through the Donner Pass when the snow is coming down and something in the air felt wrong. Tell me about it below. Good night, and whatever you do, never take no cutoffs, and hurry along as fast as you can.